Hi,
Hey,
Derek.
Travis.
How are you?
How's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Come in.
Oh,
It's my pleasure.
hi, Leo.
This is Derek. Do you remember?
Nice to see you again.
So I'm inviting Derek to be here because I'm moving out of this condo at the end of this month. So in Canada, there is a lot to do before moving out, right? So I want Derek to explain to me as well as to you guys, like what should we do and how to do before moving out from the rent property.
Right.
So the first question, when should I inform my landlord if I plan to move out?
So here in Ontario, you have to notify the landlord, at least in writing. You could verbally tell them, but at the end of your agreement, you have to come to a written agreement, and it has to be 60 days before your lease end date. So if it's July 31st, let's just say it's August 1st, you'd have to at least tell your landlord by May.
Wow.
Yeah, so
actually I was a little late.
You're a little late.
Yeah,
so that's the thing here in Canada and Ontario. There's going to be a lot of things written on paper, but sometimes, those contracts are not followed 100%.
Okay.
As long as it's mutually agreed. And sometimes the landlord even forgets.
But my landlord of this condo, they are very kind people.
Yeah, I remember.
So they didn't mind. We even had a dinner.
Oh, you did?
last month.
Oh, you did? Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's a 60 days notice, so I'm sure you've shared what your plans are.
Yeah.
But typically, you either renew your lease and you have to come to an agreement 60 days before. Sometimes the landlord increases the price.
Okay.
But as a realtor, I'm always following my clients, and I help negotiate the price.
Yeah.
And so you could renew it, or you could end the lease, find another place. Maybe you want to go somewhere else, explore somewhere else in Ontario. But regardless, it's 60 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what if I want to move out early? Like I'm not satisfied with this condo.
So if your agreement has been 6 months lease and you want to end it in 3 months, or if your agreement is a 1 year lease and you want to end it in 6 months, first you always have to tell the landlord.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not good news for a lot of landlords because they want to keep their goal is obviously to keep their unit occupied as much as possible.
Yeah.
Right, and that gives them more work. They have to put in more time, and they also have to put in money. So a lot of tenants, they don't realize that the landlords are actually the ones that pay the realtor fee.
Yeah.
So let's say if your rent is let's make it easy, $2,000 per month.
Yeah.
The landlord has to pay $2,000 to the realtors. It's not the tenant who pays; it's the landlord who pays the $2,000, and then that gets split to the realtors. So the realtor for the tenant like yourself gets, for example, me gets $1,000.
Yeah.
And then the tenant for the realtor for the landlord gets $1,000.
Okay.
So end of the day, it costs them money. So they don't want to do that. But usually they would ask you to find a new tenant for yourself. So that's called subletting. And it would have to be screened through them. So let's say if you know a friend that's across the street and is looking for a place to stay, you could have him carry on the rest of your agreement.
Or like a subcontract.
Yeah, like a subcontract. Okay. But it would have to be approved by the landlord because obviously it's a liability for them. They don't want anyone that they don't like in their property.
Okay.
Right? And what else? There's another thing that I want to talk about. So yeah, subletting, or there's a compensation fee. So let's say if you end your lease early, remember the fee that the landlord has to pay? Yeah. Sometimes they might ask you to pay that fee, right? So they'll say, okay, you pay or I'll keep your last month's rent, and I'll be using that for finding a new tenant.
So that's the bad news for landlord. Let's give a good news for landlord. What if I want to buy this property?
So
and like this property, actually my landlord want to sell this condo.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if I want to buy this, is there any benefit for the current tenants to buy it?
So it's a benefit to both the tenant and the eventually buyer and the landlord, because just like renting, when you're buying and selling a property, the person who pays the realtor fees is the seller. and usually that could be 4 to 5% nowadays. So basically, the 5% of a property, let's say if it's a $1 million house, the seller has to pay $50,000 of realtor fees.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, but when you're directly purchasing a property as a tenant, like the benefit of, you already know the familiarity of this condo, this unit. It's less work for you. You know that the problems that are here, if there are any problems, you know what you're taking on. And the landlord, not the landlord, and eventually the seller, it's less work for them, right? And they don't have to pay the realtor fees. So you could just buy.
Not title?
No, you
Zero.
could buy it directly from them. Yeah, but it doesn't happen often, but I think only like 2 times in my career that it's ever happened, and I've only been notified of this, and I don't get, like, realtors don't get any commission from this, right? So it gets directly, it's directly a sale between the buyer and the seller. But it's important to obviously involve like the lawyers and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean, because we still need like a professional to help us to
exactly
complete the process.
Yeah, so you would involve everyone else but a realtor, pretty much.
Wow, that's really bad news for
Yeah, it happens though, right? And it's better for both parties.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Darren not only helped me rent a house, obviously he also knows a lot about buying properties in Toronto. Have you ever like worked with a lot of Chinese people buying a house?
Yeah, I've worked with a lot.
Really?
Yeah, so I do also do buying and selling. I do like working with investors.
Wow.
And I like selling, but I enjoy buying more because it's a lot more future planning with the buyers.
Yeah.
Right, so I have to ask them more personal questions, and if it makes more sense to them, and I enjoy doing that stuff. In terms of my Chinese clients, I forgot who told me this, but I heard from someone or somewhere that typically Chinese people like doing business with people that they trust. So usually it's through word of mouth and through referrals. So I've just been getting a lot of word of mouth around the community, and I've learned a lot over the past few years of working with the Chinese community and how they conduct business and what they enjoy doing too as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
because I know people from different culture have different preference. So what's your preference of Chinese people you noticed?
I think with the Chinese community, the few things that I've learned is, an emphasis on feng shui.
Feng shui?
Yeah, feng shui.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's very important. So I could talk maybe for an hour about feng shui. I've learned that they're very logical too, and they're very kind. Most of them are very kind people. Like it makes sense, like whatever I think of, they're also thinking about the same thing.
Okay.
Right, and I think working with them is very easy.
Okay. Let's talk about a little about the feng shui. It's quite funny. Is there any story that you feel?
So your apartment, let's say, like your apartment is quite feng shui, right? Like, like it's facing east, so the exposure is also very important. Like sunlight, I know if it's facing north. Yeah. Whenever I conduct searches for people, Chinese people, they say anything but north, right? Because it's
they
windy.
don't like facing north.
No, they don't like facing north. Even if it's like the most beautiful like condo, and it's like cheap, they say no. Like I don't want to face north.
Wow.
Yeah, even like purchasing a home too, like the ideally is facing south because it gets more sunlight.
Yeah.
Also, the floor plan is also important. So like your condo, it's very practical, like very minimal. Everything is within arm's reach. It just makes sense where to put things. Okay. And then even like where your bedroom is, it's not directly across from the kitchen. Okay. So I've learned from another Chinese client of mine, he says that if the kitchen is right across from the bedroom, it means that you're bound to lose wealth. So I don't know if that's true, but I took his word. So And then also, obviously, the floors. Whenever I work with newcomers, especially, they're like, "Oh, where's the fourth floor?" Or "Where's the?"
They don't like a fourth floor.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
Because it means death, right?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
it sounds too much like death. So a lot of the condos here, they're actually catered for Chinese people too, right? So they don't have the fourth floor, they don't have 14.
Then there is no fourth floor button.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, 5.
Yeah.
It's actually fourth.
Yeah, it's like the fifth floor is actually the fourth floor, but
Yeah.
I guess they can be happy.
They don't like it.
Yeah. So there's so much more about feng shui too, but and I have so many stories too. Like
That's another episode.
so maybe it's
Okay.
another. I could talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So also about the culture, because I noticed in Toronto, like people from different culture tend to live in a certain area.
Yeah.
Like, I noticed most Asians live in Markham, Richmond, and like now we're in Vaughan, and also many people from Europe, right?
Yeah,
Italian people.
Yeah.
And I know Indians live in Brampton. Right?
Yeah.
So what's the pros and cons of like living their culture?
So Toronto, I always ask whenever I work with a different culture, like it doesn't have to be Chinese people, but I say, why do you want to live here, right?
Yeah.
And it's always different reasons, but the ones that I've heard that are very common answers is that they, like Toronto is very diverse, right? So they want to experience more diversity.
Yeah.
Right, so they want to learn about different cultures. They want to have experience different food. So Toronto, I've traveled up to a lot of places, but Toronto probably has one of the best foods.
Yeah.
So whenever I travel, it's always going down to Toronto.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, let's say like Chinese people who want some familiarity, and like maybe they want their children to go into a Chinese school, and they want to be across from like Chinese grocery stores and stuff like that. And I've even worked with Chinese clients who don't speak any English.
Really?
Yeah, so I would just use a translator most of the time, right?
Oh, you're so kind.
Yeah.
You have so much patience.
Yeah.
You know?
So it was just like, I remember he had like a device and he would speak into it. And sometimes it would translate incorrectly and we would just have to keep talking into that. But for him specifically, for those type of clients, they want to be in Chinese communities. So
that's
the beautiful part about the Greater Toronto area is that you could pick and choose where you want to live, right? Depending on the price, right? So Markham and Richmond Hill, very expensive areas, but if you get that experience, you're around your people, then maybe it's worth it for you. And if you love Italian food and stuff like that, then you live in Vaughan, right?
Okay.
But a lot of times that I work with people who are newcomers or first-time home buyers, they want to be close to transportation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and maybe this can be like another discussion in the future. But the two things that I always prioritize for, especially newcomers, is safety and transportation. So I want to help them find a place that's safe, right? Because one wrong turn in Toronto, you're gonna face maybe a situation you don't want to be in. Yeah.
That makes sense. Because for me, when I first come here in Canada, I chose Oshawa.
Yeah.
That's a place I noticed far away from the Asian community because I want to practice my English.
Yeah.
To integrate it into the country quicker.
Now you have an Oshawa accent.
But now, after 1 year, I feel my English is not good, but it's enough.
Yeah.
So I prefer to live close to Richmond because I like the Chinese food.
Exactly. Yeah. Like for me, when I go to Richmond Hill, if I'm craving Chinese food, like Sichuan food, I'll go to Richmond Hill because I know they have authentic food. And it's like 15, 20 minutes from where I live. So these are all accessible areas. But finding a place obviously depends if you have a car or if you have children, if you want to, be in a place for your children. Like it depends on your circumstance. Yeah.
So what's the key steps to buy a condo here in Toronto?
So the key steps to buying a property, any property, is you have to make sure you could get pre-approved first. And you have to be very honest with the bank who are often the lenders, where you get the pre-approval. So you'd have to make sure first you have a good job, right? You have a good credit score. If you have any debts, make sure you control and manage those. Because when you get pre-approved from the bank, you go to the bank and you ask, hey, I need to borrow some money.
Yeah.
They just like very much like renting, but they just look more into your assets, right? And if you're making good money from your job or your business or whatever, and if you're paying your debts in time, and then they'll say, okay, Travis, I'll give you this amount of money. And then from that money, you work with a realtor. You often hire a realtor and you start searching for properties that you want to buy. So if the bank tells you, okay, with your profile, you could afford $600,000, and your budget determines where you end up living in the Greater Toronto area, right? So if you can't afford a condo that's, in Vaughan, that's $600,000, because let's say if the condos here are $700,000, then you'd have to look at other cities.
Well, that's interesting. So you have to get in touch with the bank first and then hire the realtor. Oh, that's different from what we do in China.
Oh, really?
We just look for a property
by
ourselves or with a realtor at first. And when you decide to buy a property and you connect with a bank and to get a debt. Oh, that's so different.
Yeah, so I guess in this sense, I didn't know that, but I guess it's backwards. So they want to see how much you could afford first, because...
so you know the exact amount of your budget.
Exactly.
It's precise from the bank.
Yeah. Oh. So, and also another thing to consider too is I always advise my buyers, let's say if the bank or the lender, whoever, it doesn't have to be a bank, it could be a private lender as well. Yeah. If they give you like $600,000 budget and this is what you could afford, I always say don't maximize what you're given, because you also have to come out with the closing costs. So
closing costs?
Yeah. So when you purchase a property, whether if it's a house or a condo, it has to be there's property taxes, there's land transfer tax. There's a lot of taxes here.
Okay.
What else? There's lawyer fees. There's moving costs. Yeah. So it's actually the taxes that take up most of the costs, right?
So the process of buying a condo and buying a house is basically the same, right? Get in touch with the bank and looking for your...
Yeah, exactly. And surprisingly, buying a house in the Greater Toronto area now is a lot easier than renting a place sometimes. Really? So even for our experience last year when renting, so 2023 was the most competitive year for renting, because that's when a lot of the newcomers were coming. There's refugees. There wasn't as many condos available. It's just the housing market was just very bad. But nowadays there's more condos, so there's more availability and not as many newcomers. So you could say there's less competition. Okay. But when you're renting a property, not only are the landlords screening and assessing your finances, but they want to know how you are as a person, right? Oh, okay, how's your dog too? How big is your dog?
I experienced that
exactly.
I got rejected 3 times.
Exactly. But when it comes to purchasing a house, like with going through a lender or a bank, all they really care about is your money. They don't care if you have a dog, or they don't care, if you'll make a mess in the property, right? It's all they care about is can you pay off the mortgage?
Yeah, but speaking of newcomers, they don't have credit score.
Yeah.
How can they get approval from the bank?
So if you're trying to purchase a property as a newcomer, that's something that maybe I can make another video about.
Okay. So there is a way to
there's a way. It's not the most ethical way, but people have been doing it. But basically, you're capped at $500,000 with your permit. Okay. And obviously, in the Greater Toronto area, there's not much you could afford with $500,000. Maybe you could afford a parking spot or a storage room, right?
Okay.
But for $500,000, you'd have to look more outside of the city, and the banks will also ask for similar situations, like, do you have savings? What are your jobs? But I always advise maybe 2 years of working experience of maybe a full-time or part-time job, and then maybe transitioning to getting your permanent residency, like your PR, and then from there, once you're established, it's a lot easier to purchase a property with, you know.
Oh, here is a really important question. Is there any like common mistakes you notice first-time buyers or like newcomers make when buying a house?
For newcomers, I say, you know, and just do your due diligence as well, right? And seek out good resources. So I know with Chinese newcomers, they do get a lot of their facts from Redbook.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But
we like doing research on Redbook.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. And from my experience, Redbook is a good resource, but there's very few times too where Redbook is not accurate. So you have to make sure to ask the right resources and check it out for yourself. Another thing too for first-time home buyers is not to have as much, or I would say newcomers, when you're finding a new place, try not to involve so many emotions, like trying to find the perfect place. Because end of the day, 1 year goes by pretty fast, and you could be, I guess, evicted by the landlord. Maybe the landlord wants to sell their property, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to repeat the process again.
Yeah.
Right. So find a place where you could find yourself establishing yourself, good transportation, somewhere that's safe, maybe close to your school or work, and then find your dream home afterwards. And then once you are in that stage where you could purchase a property, then yes, like obviously you're spending lots of money. Make sure you love the place. Look at every corner of the property and make sure you love it. Make sure you know the area very well.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Don't rush.
Yeah, don't rush. Yeah.
Don't want to be perfect overnight.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So actually, Darius' office is downstairs near my home.
Yeah.
How about let's go there to have a look?
Sure. Let's go.
Okay. I'll ask you some more questions on the way.
Anytime. Yeah.
So, you have bought 2 condos.
One condo I purchased as a pre-construction, and as soon as it finished building in 2021, I moved in.
So pre-construction means it's actually a house.
So basically, you're purchasing a property that's not there yet.
Okay.
So you're investing into the developer to build
I got it.
the property.
Okay.
And then as soon as it's done building, you move in. And it makes a lot of sense for first-time home buyers like myself at the time, just because the financing is a little more affordable.
Do you have a plan to buy a house in the future?
Yeah, so hopefully in the next 2 years or so.
How much is it need to buy a house for down payment? Like
in a house nowadays? So the average cost of a house now, like in, I guess, the attractive areas of the GTA, it's starting maybe like 800,000 to 900,000. And typically the recommended down payment would probably be around 15 to 20%.
What's the like average age for local Toronto people to buy their first property?
To buy the first property, before it was much younger, right? Like when I've been watching like old TV shows lately, and people in the 80s, 90s, they would buy their first home in like their early 20s because it was a lot more affordable. It made sense with what they were making at the time. But obviously here, wages has not increased, but housing and everything else has, right? But the average age, the last time I checked, is about 36 years old.
36 years?
Yeah.
Wow. You bought it at like 26.
Yes, yes.
That's cool. Okay, so we're just outside Darius' company.
Century 21.
Yeah, so I got last 2 questions for him. So can you tell us a bit about your background, like how you became a realtor in Toronto?
So it's a long story, but I'm gonna try to simplify it as much as possible. I've gone through a lot of different experiences. I've worked as a nurse. I've done computer programming. I ran my...
You did computer programming?
Yeah, that was actually my first program.
You know how to code?
Yeah, I know how to code.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm still out of touch right now, but I used to know how to code. There's a games that I used to play that I used to code for and create my own bots. But that's another story. But I've tried many things. I've had my own e-commerce business.
Yeah.
And right now I've been doing real estate since 2018. But my foundation of things has always been sales and just trying new things and always serving people. And in addition to that, it's always been my experiences as well, my personal experience. So I've lived in apartments, I've lived in basements, I've lived in townhomes, I've roomed with others, obviously lived with my parents. Now I live in Vaughan. So I actually live in this area, not too far from my condo, my office. And I have come across many walks of life. So I kind of understand what people need and I try to help them as much as possible.
Cool, you got a lot of experience. In Mandarin, we say you are 斜杠青年, which means you work in a lot of trades.
Yes, yeah. I'm very privileged to do that. When I was younger, I was able to take more risks, but obviously that I'm a little bit older, things have to be a little bit more calculated.
So what if my viewers want to get in touch with you? They want to rent or buy a house in Toronto?
So I do have Redbook now. I signed up about a week or two ago, and I'm just going to have fun with it. So you could contact me there. You could contact me on my email or even on my phone. When you contact me, it doesn't have to be anything real estate related. I am trying to learn the Chinese culture as much as possible through Redbook. Maybe one day I could speak Mandarin. And yeah, contact me anytime for anything, pretty much.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Actually, we just taught Derry about the Redbook last week. So he just opened his account.
Yeah.
So I put his account here and you can find him over there. So thanks for today's interview. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.